In the hushed corridors of power, a truth has finally been spoken aloud, a truth that reshapes a century of North American alliance, an alliance forged in the fires of 2 world wars, solidified by the shared defense of a continent, and economically fused by landmark agreements. This truth was born not from a declaration of war, but from the silence of empty shopping malls and vacant hotel rooms. For months, Washington operated under a simple yet deeply flawed assumption that in any trade dispute, Canada, the smaller, more dependent partner, would inevitably yield. It was a textbook case of power politics, a core belief that economic gravity would always pull Canada back into the American orbit. That assumption has just been shattered. The president's top aide has just admitted it. Canada's quiet revenge is working. It's a revenge enacted not with retaliatory tariffs, but with millions of individual choices. Overnight, the world's longest undefended border has become an economic wall. Cross-border travel has collapsed, billions in U.S. tourism have evaporated, and in a strategic masterstroke, Canadian exports are shifting away, pivoting with surprising speed toward Europe and Asia. The tariffs, sold to the American public as a shield to protect workers, are instead gutting U.S. border towns. Consider Plattsburgh, New York, a city that long branded itself as Montreal's U.S. suburb. Today its malls are echoing voids. Or take Bellingham, Washington, where for decades Vancouverites flocked for cheaper gas and dairy. Now, local business owners report revenue drops of up to 70%. It's like someone just turned off the tap, one owner told a local newspaper. These weren't just customers, they were our neighbors. That sentiment echoes up and down the 525-mile border. For generations, the line was a permeable membrane with families and friendships spanning both sides. Hockey teams from Ontario played in Michigan leagues. Shoppers from BC were on a first-name basis with cashiers in Washington. The tariffs didn't just sever a commercial relationship, they fractured a community. What was supposed to be leverage has flipped into a devastating vulnerability. The admission came during a rare, unscheduled Oval Office meeting. The air in the room was thick with unspoken failure. The president, flanked by his chief of staff, listened as his trade advisor, a man known for his hawkish stance, leaned forward and acknowledged what few in the administration dared to say publicly. This wasn't an "I told you so" moment, it was a quiet surrender to an unexpected reality. Canada's retaliation, a strategy of economic avoidance rather than direct confrontation, is biting harder than any U.S. tariff ever could. This isn't politics, he reportedly said. It's arithmetic. We calculated the impact of our tariffs on their aluminum, the advisor explained, but we never calculated the impact of their citizens simply choosing to stay home. We focused on the supply chain, and they weaponized the demand chain. The advisor, a man who had built his career on aggressive trade tactics, was now explaining a humbling truth. They had used a sledgehammer where a scalpel was needed, and in doing so had handed Canada the very tool it needed to pry itself free. And the math is brutal. The numbers prove it, and they are staggering. In July alone, Canadian road trips to the U.S. plunged 37%. That's not just a statistic, that's over 1 million individual decisions not to cross the border for shopping, entertainment, or a weekend getaway. Air travel, once a seamless corridor between major hubs, fell 26%. This wasn't a blip, it was the beginning of a trend, with 7 straight months of contraction following. Canada, once America's largest and most reliable source of international visitors, over 10 million a year, more than from all of Europe combined, has effectively cut 1/3 of that flow. To put that in perspective, the drop is equivalent to losing every single tourist from Germany and Japan combined. Imagine every third Canadian tourist, shopper, and vacationer vanishing overnight. The result is a quiet catastrophe for tourism-dependent economies. Florida's snowbird economy, an institution built over half a century, is facing an unprecedented winter. The state normally welcomes 3.3 million Canadians annually who own an estimated 500,000 properties. By mid-2025, new bookings had dropped nearly 18%. But the real story is in the secondary effects. The property management companies, the pool cleaners, the local diners. The drop cost hotels, resorts, and restaurants hundreds of millions in direct revenue, with billions more lost in overall economic activity. Beyond the balance sheets, a social contract is fraying. These communities weren't just transactional, they were integrated. Canadians coached Little League and volunteered at local charities. Now, entire cul-de-sacs sit empty, a testament to a friendship put on ice. In Vermont and New Hampshire, ski resorts that rely on weekend traffic from Quebec are seeing empty slopes. Our season pass sales from Canadian postal codes are down 60%, says one resort manager. We're laying off ski instructors in January. That's never happened. In towns like Grand Forks, North Dakota, the parking lots of big box stores that were once filled with Manitoba license plates are now eerily quiet, with sales losses reported as high as 40%. For many small business owners, the political debate in Washington feels distant and abstract. For them, it's not about sovereignty, it's about survival. It's about whether they can make payroll next month. Meanwhile, as American border economies bleed, Canada's exports are quietly and efficiently realigning. For decades, Canadian policymakers have preached the gospel of trade diversification, a long-held ambition to reduce its economic dependence on its southern neighbor. It was a recurring theme in Canadian politics, an aspiration often dismissed as wishful thinking. As prime ministers from Trudeau Sr. to Harper had tried and failed to meaningfully shift trade away from the U.S., the gravitational pull was simply too strong. The tariffs, ironically, provided the political rocket fuel that decades of policy papers could not. It forced a national reckoning, turning a theoretical goal into an urgent practical mission. While U.S.-bound shipments fell 12%, exports to Asia and Europe surged nearly 15%. This wasn't just a shift in existing goods, it was the creation of entirely new markets. Gold exports to the UK, seeking stability outside the US financial system, soared an astonishing 473%. High-tech agricultural equipment found new buyers in the Netherlands. Canadian lumber, once destined for US housing projects, is now being shipped to build homes in a booming Japan. Farm goods to Japan and Indonesia hit records as Canada aggressively moved to ratify and expand agreements under the Trans-Pacific Partnership, a deal the U.S. had strategically pioneered and then abruptly abandoned. Canadian negotiators found themselves walking through doors Washington had unlocked and then left wide open. For decades, Canada's economy was described as chained to America. Now the chain is breaking. As one economist noted, we're witnessing the de-risking of the Canadian economy in real time. For 100 years, putting all our eggs in the American basket was the safe bet. Now it's seen as a liability. The highly integrated North American auto sector, long the symbol of this bond, is seeing its first cracks as Canadian parts manufacturers actively seek partners overseas. This isn't just a boycott, it's a structural pivot, a fundamental rewiring of the North American economic map. Tariffs once sold as protection are accelerating Canada's independence while hollowing out U.S. leverage. The numbers from the northern border states tell the same story. New York alone saw 22% fewer Canadian crossings in July, 500,000 fewer people spending money in its stores and restaurants. Duty-free sales, the canary in the coal mine for border health, plunged 40%. Analysts now estimate Canada will withhold up to $3 billion in U.S. vacation spending this year alone. But the most worrying sign for Washington is that this shift is not temporary. It's becoming permanent. Canada is locking in new 20-year LNG contracts with Japan and Germany, markets hungry for non-Russian energy. The Canadian government is actively promoting domestic tourism, with slick, effective campaigns encouraging citizens to see Canada first, redirecting billions of dollars inward. And in a move that sent a quiet but clear signal to Wall Street, Canada's central bank began systematically reducing its holdings of U.S. treasuries. Each move on its own is significant. Together they deepen a pattern: less dependence on Washington, more autonomy abroad. The Oval Office confession wasn't boasting, it was recognition. It was the quiet admission of a massive strategic miscalculation. The administration had picked a fight with its closest ally, expecting a quick submission. Instead, it triggered a quiet economic revolution. The United States assumed it was the indispensable partner, but it's learning a hard lesson in interdependence, a lesson that in a globalized world, even your closest ally has other options. The question now is not if the tariffs will be lifted, but whether the economic and, more importantly, the psychological ties that defined a continent for over a century can ever be fully repaired. The quiet revenge may be over, but its consequences are just beginning.